Welcome to the presentation for Hotel Business Development Strategies. Me and my colleagues Markus and Jackie will give you a deeper insight today about the market of Sydney. Today we will give you an introduction to the market, a general makeup of the market, current statistics, comparable markets, analysis of pipeline projects, and a final conclusion about the market of Sydney. To define the market of Sydney, we first had to define the main characteristics of the market of Sydney. These characteristics will help us to define particular consumers through market segmentation, the process of separating and identifying key customer groups. The characteristics that seems important to us for the market of Sydney are household expenditures. These expenditures exist of an average of monthly living expenses for a family. For a family of 4, we found out that this is $5,378 per month. For sources of income, more than 60% from income comes from wages and salaries, and the rest comes from properties, businesses, and cash benefits. Another characteristic for the market are businesses. Sydney's local neighborhoods cover various commercial day and nighttime economies that offer customers a diverse range of products and services. For demographics, we found that in 2019, Sydney counted a population of 5,073 million people. Last but not least, attractions. The most popular attraction in Sydney for tourists is the Sydney Opera House, but it is also well known for the beaches, where you can go for long walks.
So now we're going to present you the general makeup of the Sydney market, which we're going to discuss in different categories. We will start off by discussing the Sydney market. So by submarket, we can see that Sydney Centre is the largest submarket with the number of nearly 24,000 rooms, and followed by Sydney West with almost 8,000 rooms. By looking into different scales in the Sydney market, we can see that there is only 8 luxury chain hotels. Independence has the largest scale, which has over 200 properties, and followed by upper scale and mid scale and economy are the smaller scale among all of them. So when we look into the class, we have to make a subtraction with the scale. After the subtraction, we can see that most of them is from mid-scale with 98 properties, followed by 42 economy independence properties, and the least is upscale with 9 independent properties. Now we're looking deeply into this location in the Sydney market. So most of them are from suburban with 209 properties, followed by urban, and there is the same amount of properties at the airport and interstates, and a few from resort and small metro and town. By looking into the property size and the Sydney market, we can see that most of the hotels are in less than 75 room range, followed by 75 to 149, and there are 98 properties are above 150 rooms range, including 10 of them are about 500 rooms range. In this slide, we filtered the chain with greater than 300 rooms. From the graph, we can see that there are more than 30 properties, and most of them are from Marathon Suites. Some of them are under independent right now because they were originally affiliated. When we look into the operations of the properties in the Sydney market, we have excluded the closed hotels from the data, and most of the hotels are under independent operation, followed by chain management. After looking into the Sydney market, I will now present you the Sydney surroundings market. By submarket, we can see that Sydney Drive Regional is the largest submarket, followed by Newcastle and Swansea area. Looking into the scale in Sydney surroundings market, we can see that there is only one luxury chain hotel and independent and upscale are the largest scale group, and the smallest are upper scale and economy. As mentioned before, we also have to make a subtraction with the scale. So in Sydney surroundings market, we can see that the most of them are from economy independents with just more than 200 properties, followed by 85 mid-scale independents, and the least are 15 luxury class independents properties. By looking into the location in the Sydney surroundings market, we can see that the most properties are from suburban, which is also the same in Sydney market, followed by small metro and town, and there are the same amount of properties in urban and interstates and a few at the airports. Last but not least, we also have to look into the size in the market. So as the same in the Sydney market, most of the hotels are in less than 75 room range, followed by 75 to 149, and there are 8 properties above 150 rooms, including one of them are above 500 room range.
I will now show you with some important graphs some of the most current statistics of the market of Sydney. As you can see, for the last decade of Sydney, the occupancy was very consistent. In 2010 it was 82, and in 2019 it was 82 again. The peaking point is in 2017 with a number of 86. For the ADR, the peaking point is in 2017 as well. They have an ADR of 228. The same peaking point happens in RevPAR. This is in 2017 as well with 195. For ADR and RevPAR, you see that they both decrease after 2017. For the percentual changes of Sydney of the last decade, you can see that the occupancy, ADR and RevPAR are slightly the same. They all peak in 2013, they increase and keep sort of increasing, and they all decrease after 2015. The next graph shows the percentual changes for the last decade about the supply, demand and revenue. The supply is fluctuating every time. There is a strong demand, but the revenue is increasing but decreasing at the end after 2017. Taking a closer look at the room supply and demand percentage change for Sydney, you can see that the demand is peaking in 2010 and 2014. Both after those peaking points, it decreases. For the supply numbers, it keeps on increasing, but is the highest in the last 2 years. For the actual supply and demand of Sydney, you can see that they increase in parallel lines, but the actual demand decreases again in 2019. This graph shows the occupancy and ADR percentage change for the Sydney market. The occupancy and ADR are both peaking in the half of 2010 and are both decreasing after. ADR stays steady after the decrease, and occupancy keeps on decreasing and increases later again, but decreases at the end as well. Furthermore, for the actual occupancy and ADR, the graph shows that the actual ADR peaks from 2012 to 2013, and again later on in 2018. Actual occupancy percentages increases every year. The next graph shows the RevPAR percentage change and the actual RevPAR actual change combined in one graph. The RevPAR percentual change peaks in 2011 and again in the second half of 2017. However, RevPAR actual peaks in 2012 and in 2018. Both decrease in between the peaking moments.
In the following session, we have chosen Melbourne, Brisbane, Lisbon, Barcelona, and London to compare with Sydney markets. And we chose them is because we also wanted to see how our data performing with the Australian market itself and compare Sydney with the European market based on the similar population and to compare with a big city such as London. This graph shows the occupancy percentage change for the six markets over the last 5 years. Lisbon has a peak in 2015. In Barcelona, due to a attack happened in the 18th of August 2018, and a Catalan independence referendum happened during the year. The occupancy decreased in 2018 and recovered in 2019. Another graph showing the ADR percentage change for the six markets over the last 5 years. All the markets are in a similar pattern. In Lisbon, there is a Eurovision Song Contest happened in May 2018, so the ADR percentage increased a little bit. And after the attack in August and the referendum, and then the ADR was decreased. And for London, due to the deal for Brexit was introduced in 2016, so the ADR were fluctuating over the last 5 years. This graph will show the RevPAR percentage change for the six markets over the last 5 years. It is a similar pattern with the ADR percentage change. Brisbane has a downturn in 2018, and for London and Lisbon, it is the same reason as mentioned before, such as the Eurovision contest, the attack and the referendum in Lisbon, and the deal for Brexit happened in UK, so this also affect the RevPAR percentage change over the last 5 years. And now we'll just go back to the Sydney market itself, and this graph will show the room supply, demand, and occupancy percentage change over the last decade. It can see that supply and demand is similar to the occupancy, and occupancy had a flood since 2017 and decreased to negative percentage back in 2018. The last graph in this section will show you the occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR percentage change for the Sydney market over the last decade. Occupancy has a peak in 2010 and kept stable afterwards until 2019 to a slightly negative percentage. ADR and RevPAR have a similar pattern over the last decade as well. After showing you the comparable market in line graph, I am now going to show you market breakdowns in bar graphs. We will start off by looking in the class of the Sydney market. This graph shows supply and demand percentage change. From the graph, we can see that upscale has a relatively strong supply and demand growth. Luxury and mid-scale have a negative demand growth of nearly negative 2%. This graph shows supply percentage change for the last 5 years, and there is a strong growth in luxury segment in 2018 and upper scale in 2016 of both double digits, and upper scale are all in positive growth for the last 5 years. When we look into the occupancy and ADR percentage change, it is interesting to see that all of them are in negative growth range, and especially in ADR, some of them are in double digits negative growth. This graph shows actual occupancy in ADR for all the classes, and we can see that there is a strong occupancy in upper segment ranging from 80 to 85% and a larger ADR gap between luxury and upper upscale. Followed by the RevPAR percentage change in actuals. All of the RevPAR percentage change are in negative growth. The highest RevPAR is in luxury segment, and there is a similar gap between upscale and upper mid-scale, and upper mid-scale and mid-scale. We zoom in the RevPAR percentage changes over the last 5 years. The data in the economy segment is not shown until 2019, but basically all of them are in a similar pattern. After showing you the class, I will show you the submarket in the Sydney market. This graph shows supply and demand percentage change. Sydney Airport has a strong supply growth of nearly 4%. In terms of demand, there is a positive growth range in Sydney Airport and Sydney West. This graph shows occupancy and ADR percentage change. It is similar to the class. All of them are in negative growth range. Sydney East and South and Sydney North are in double digits. This graph shows the actual occupancy in ADR. Sydney Airport, Sydney Centre, and Sydney North has the strongest occupancy, and Sydney Airport has the nearly lowest ADR among all of the submarkets. Speaking of the RevPAR percentage and actuals, all of the RevPAR percentage change are in negative double digits, and Sydney Centre has the highest RevPAR of 150. In this graph, we try to combine other submarkets together to compare with Sydney Centre with the percentage change of supply, demand, and different KPIs. And after combining together, we can see that there's only a slight difference in the demand, while the others have a bigger gap. This graph shows the supply and demand percentage change of Sydney versus other comparable markets. So in general, other markets are performing well than Sydney, except Barcelona has a lower supply growth than Sydney. By looking into the occupancy and ADR percentage change, Barcelona has positive growth in both occupancy and ADR, while Sydney has worse ADR percentage change with nearly negative 10%. Moving on to compare the actual occupancy and ADR of our 6 markets, London has the highest occupancy in ADR, while Sydney has the second highest occupancy, and Brisbane has the lowest occupancy in ADR. The last graph with market breakdowns is to compare RevPAR percentage in the actual RevPAR. London has the highest RevPAR, 164, followed by the same RevPAR in Sydney and Barcelona, and Sydney has the lowest RevPAR percentage change.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the pipeline projects and I'm going to analyze the projects as well. So let's start with the historical supply of number of hotels in the Sydney hotel market in the last 5 years. It's obvious to see that the independent hotel category has the biggest amount of hotels, followed by the upscale category and the upper upscale category. But here we can also see that there's a big difference between the biggest category and the next biggest category. Because for example in 2019 the independent hotel category had 207 hotels, but the next biggest category, the upscale category, only 65. So there's a big difference between these big categories when it comes to number of hotels. This chart shows the number of rooms in the same time frame than the last slide, so in the last 5 years. And here it's interesting to see that the independent hotel category, the upscale category, and the upper upscale category have about the same number of rooms available. But as you remembered from last slide, there was a big difference between in the number of hotels that are available. So this leads to the assumption that the upper upscale hotels and the upscale hotels are a lot bigger and that they provide a lot more hotels than the hotels that are part of the independent hotel category. This chart here shows the recent opened hotels, but in a really short time frame. So as you can see, the time goes from March 2019 to December 2019. This is just a 10 months time frame. And in this short time frame, there were about 900 rooms added to the Sydney hotel market. This chart here shows the existing rooms and the rooms that are currently in the pipeline. So as you can see, the part of the chart that is dark blue shows the existing rooms, and the colors on top of that, they show the rooms that are red for in construction, green for final planning, yellow for planning, and blue for unconfirmed. And it's interesting to see again that the hotel room numbers in the independent hotel category, upscale and upper upscale category are about the same. But there's a big difference when it comes to the rooms that are currently in the pipeline. Obviously, the independent hotel category has the biggest amount of rooms that are in the pipeline, followed by upper upscale, and then followed by the upscale category. This chart in front of us shows again the rooms that are in the pipeline, but without the existing rooms. So here it shows in a more detailed way how big the difference is between the independent hotel category, which has the highest amount of rooms in the pipeline, and the category, the upper upscale category, that has the second biggest amount of rooms in the pipeline. This chart shows the hotels that are going to be opened in the next year. So the time frame here is from March 2020 until January 2021. And this shows that 10 hotels are going to be opened this year, so in 2020, and 14 hotels in 2021. But please, if you have a look at the rooms, you can see that there's a big amount of rooms will be added to the Sydney hotel market. This chart in front of us shows the hotel chains and their rooms that they have in the pipeline. So if you have a look at the bottom part of the chart, there's the Radisson Blu hotel chain, and they have 364 rooms in the pipeline. But if we go to the top part of the chart, there's the Meriton Suites, and they have 3,890 rooms in the pipeline. So this again shows that there's a big difference between the different hotel categories and hotel chains when it comes to their rooms and the rooms that they are having in the pipeline. Okay, so now I would like to conclude the whole presentation. First of all, we discovered that independent hotels in suburban locations with less than 75 rooms, that they have the biggest part in the Sydney hotel market. And this is also shown in the next factor because 50% of the hotels that are operated in Sydney are operated as independent hotels. This again shows how major this category is for the market. Next, we had a look at the key performance indicators, the occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR. These numbers decreased in a high manner in 2018 and 2019, and they reached the ultimate goal in 2020 due to the COVID-19 crisis, but it is expected that these numbers will rise again, but in a very slow manner. The next thing we looked at were the important factors hotel investors need to consider if they would like to invest in the Sydney hotel market. So first of all, they need to consider the upscale hotel sector because this sector is going to be rise and will have an important part of the Sydney hotel market. And the next factor they need to consider is that Sydney overall did not perform good when it comes to occupancy and ADR. We found that out while we compared Sydney with the other 5 markets that we compared during our analysis, so they need to consider that as well. And last but not least, Sydney is the 3rd best living city after Vienna and Melbourne, and this again shows how important Sydney as a city is and how important the Sydney hotel market is in general. Now, we would just like to say thank you and have a nice day.